The solar sabotage. The instant the glass shattered, it wasn't just my solar panels that broke, it was Margaret's last shred of credibility. She stood there, teetering on a flimsy lawn chair, brandishing a garden rake like a suburban warlord, smashing my rooftop array with a vengeance while shouting about unauthorized sunlight theft. The noise ricocheted through our quiet cul-de-sac, and for a fleeting moment, I thought it was a bizarre prank. But then my phone buzzed with an emergency alert. The sheriff's command post, 3 miles away, had gone dark right in the middle of a manhunt for an armed fugitive. Margaret, our neighborhood's self-proclaimed guardian of aesthetics, had no idea her tantrum had just crippled a critical law enforcement operation. As I watched her swing that rake, I realized something both terrifying and darkly amusing. She just committed a felony, all because my solar panels didn't match her vision of a perfect community. It all began a month earlier when I installed a cutting-edge solar array on my roof. These weren't your typical home panels. They were military-grade, high-efficiency units, part of a state emergency resilience program. I'd signed a non-disclosure agreement to host a backup power node for the county sheriff's department, a setup designed to support their mobile command post during crises like natural disasters or, as it happened, an ongoing criminal pursuit. The system was discreet, secure, and completely off the neighborhood's radar until Margaret spotted it during one of her daily patrols, armed with binoculars and a clipboard. Margaret was the kind of person who'd start a feud over an untrimmed hedge. She measured lawn heights, critiqued mailbox designs, and once filed a complaint about a neighbor's Christmas lights being too festive. To her, our subdivision was her kingdom, and she ruled it with passive-aggressive notes and HOA gossip, despite having no official authority. When she saw my panels, she left a note on my door, taped with neon green duct tape. Your installation violates community standards. Remove it or face HOA consequences. I ignored it. I had state permits and a sheriff's signature in my files. But Margaret didn't take kindly to being dismissed. Her campaign escalated fast. She called a neighborhood meeting, claiming my panels were an eyesore and might emit harmful radiation. When nobody showed up to her solo protest, she reported me to the city. The inspector, already aware of the state's approval, just laughed and left. But Margaret's ego was bruised. She'd never failed to bully a neighbor into compliance, and 2A systems engineer with 2 defense contracts and a secure power relay in my basement wasn't bending. That's when she snapped. On that fateful Thursday, I was on a call with Deputy Collins, reviewing power metrics for the sheriff's command post. They were tracking a fugitive who'd escaped custody and vanished into the nearby woods. My panels were powering their drones, cameras, and radios critical for officer safety. Mid-call, my control panel flickered, graphs froze, and the line went dead. I thought it was a blown fuse until I looked outside and saw Margaret, red-faced and sweating, smashing my panels with her rake, yelling about solar elitism and glare pollution. I ran out, shouting for her to stop, but she swung harder, shattering the left panel bank. Glass rained onto my driveway as neighbors gawked, and one started filming. My phone buzzed again. Power failure. Command Post Delta. Sheriff Harlan's ID flashed on the screen. Margaret stepped off her chair, smug as ever, brushing off her yoga pants. "You're welcome," she sneered. "Now maybe you'll follow HOA rules." I didn't respond. I was already picturing the fallout. This wasn't just vandalism, it was sabotage of a live law enforcement operation. 20 minutes later, black SUVs rolled into our cul-de-sac. Not the usual patrol cars, but heavy-duty vehicles with tinted windows. Sheriff Harlan stepped out, his presence commanding. Margaret, sipping lemonade on her porch, looked amused until he approached her. "Ma'am," he said, "did you know you just disabled a tactical surveillance grid tracking an armed suspect?" Margaret blinked, stammering. "I just broke some ugly panels. They weren't HOA approved, and they were blinding my dog." Harlan didn't blink. He showed her time-stamped photos of my panels, stamped with federal seals. "You've interfered with a state operation," he said. "You're under investigation for damaging protected infrastructure." Neighbors watched, phones out, as Margaret's face paled. She tried to deflect, claiming she'd never been told about the panel's purpose, but Harlan cut her off. "This isn't HOA business. This is jail time." The fallout was swift. That afternoon, Sheriff Harlan called an emergency HOA meeting at the community center. I didn't have to attend, but I went, curious to see how Margaret would squirm. The room was packed, the HOA board fidgeting as Harlan set up a projector. Margaret sat in the front row, defiant but nervous. Harlan presented the evidence. My rooftop camera footage showing her smashing the panels, muttering about teaching the solar freak a lesson, and drone footage from the sheriff's team, capturing her mid-rant. The room fell silent. Then came the bombshell. Internal HOA emails praising Margaret's vigilance and giving her informal authority to handle non-compliant neighbors. One email read, "If you won't ditch those solar eyesores, Margaret will take care of it." The crowd gasped. My type, the guy who powered their homes during last year's wildfire outages, was who they'd targeted. Neighbors started speaking up. Mrs. Thompson said Margaret had threatened to fine her for too many flower pots. Another mentioned a noise complaint over a backyard fountain. The grievances poured out, exposing years of Margaret's unchecked intimidation. Then Harlan dropped the final blow. My property was now a protected utility node, meaning any interference could be prosecuted like tampering with a power station. Margaret asked what that meant for her. "Felony charges," Harlan replied. The meeting dissolved in chaos, with neighbors apologizing to me and the HOA board scrambling to save face. The case went to court the following week, drawing local media and curious onlookers. Margaret sat with her frazzled lawyer, her forced smile fading when she saw me. The prosecutor played the Fujimi cameras, the sheriff's drones showing her relentless attack. Sheriff Harlan testified about the outage's impact on officer safety during the manhunt. Then came the emails, proving the HOA's complicity. Margaret's lawyer argued she didn't know the panel's purpose, but the evidence was airtight. In a desperate move, Margaret stood and ranted, accusing me of installing spy tech and claiming she was the victim, bullied for upholding traditional values. The judge's gavel silenced her. Rather than an immediate ruling, the judge offered a settlement, full restitution, a public apology, removal from the HOA, and a statewide ban on holding any HOA enforcement role. Margaret reluctantly agreed, avoiding jail but losing her grip on power. The HOA board faced its reckoning. Neighbors petitioned to dissolve the board, and within days, most members resigned, citing stress or vanishing quietly. A new committee focused on maintenance and emergency prep took their place. Technicians replaced my panels with upgraded, tamper-proof units funded by the sheriff's emergency grant and the HOA's insurance. Neighbors, once wary of my weird tech, now brought coffee and asked about solar setups. The Department of Emergency Services sent a letter inviting me to consult on expanding solar grids across rural counties. What started as a side project became a state blueprint, all because Margaret's ego backfired. Margaret's public apology was a typed note on the community board, cold and insincere. Worse was the sign on her lawn for 30 days. "I damaged critical infrastructure and endangered public safety. I deeply regret my actions." Kids took selfies with it. Drivers slowed to read it. Margaret stayed indoors, blinds drawn, her reign over the neighborhood over. The subdivision changed. We held a cookout, the first in years, without HOA oversight. Kids played, music blared, and I brought a solar-powered popcorn machine that stole the show. Neighbors asked about energy systems, curious rather than suspicious. The new community group invited me to present on solar grids, and the room buzzed with ideas. One neighbor offered discounted equipment. Another volunteered to stock a storm prep cabinet. It wasn't just my win, it was ours. Sheriff Harlan, before transferring to a new post, shook my hand and said, "You never know who you're dealing with until they show you." He meant Margaret, but it fit us all. She swung her rake to tear something down, but ended up breaking the walls that divided us. Now, every morning, my panels hum. Powering more than a grid, they power a story of arrogance exposed and a community rebuilt. What do you think about Margaret's actions? Have you ever faced someone like her, using power to control or intimidate? Share your thoughts in the comments, especially on how we handle bullying and injustice in our communities. Let's hear your perspective.